How many times has it happened to you that you're playing a game of chess and suddenly you find that things couldn't get any worse? Your opponent is doing much better than you. Suddenly, you find yourself needing a complete miracle to be able to turn the game around, but you don't really know what just happened. Well, in this video, I'm not only going to show you exactly what happened, but I'm also going to show you how to do it yourself so that you're the one doing all of this to your opponent, and your opponent is the one who needs a miracle to win the game. Actually, in this game I'm going to show you, the Scandinavian defense is played, but that's not the most important thing. In fact, on this channel, we've seen thousands of times how to punish this defense, and we've also seen many times how to play it in our favor. You already know that the opening in chess isn't the most important thing. Why? Because as soon as the opening moves are over, the real chess begins. For example, in this game, after pawn takes, this pawn wasn't immediately recaptured because that would be the traditional Scandinavian defense and it can be quickly kicked out with knight to c3, as we've seen on the channel. The move knight to ef6 was used, which is a kind of gambit where it proposes to recover this pawn a little bit later with the knight, or if the move c4 is used in the game, which is what happened, defending this pawn, black tries to play this e6. What for? So that when these pawns are exchanged, black is down a pawn, it's true, but in exchange for what, chess teacher? We haven't given away a pawn for nothing, right? No. In exchange for having much better piece development. We have two pieces developed and our opponent has none. Well, from here on, the interesting part begins. This has simply been an opening. On the channel, we've seen many openings. So let's focus on why what I just mentioned happens. At this moment, what characteristics do we see in the position? Let's try to make it an interactive class so that we can all improve. The idea is that here, the problem the white pieces have is this c4 pawn that has advanced too quickly. Since it has advanced too quickly, it leaves its partner, the d pawn, backward. See it? This pawn, why is it a backward pawn? Because it doesn't have any pawn either to its side or behind it, therefore it's a backward pawn. Its partner on c has advanced, and its partner on e no longer exists. Therefore, here, white, if they don't want to be very inferior in controlling the position, must play d4 immediately. Because if not, we're going to react with c5, and we're not going to let them play d4 anymore. You understand? Therefore, they must play d4 immediately, which is what they used in the game. Careful, it's a good move, yes. What problem does the white pieces player have now? That he hasn't developed any pieces, see? We're already on our third. Sure, this might seem insignificant, but as the game progresses, the difference between our active pieces and the opponent's is gonna make the absolute difference in the game. You'll see, because you're gonna love it. The game continues with bishop d2 blocking the check. Could we trade? Yes, but then we'd slightly improve the opponent's pieces. So we're gonna ask ourselves the following. If my opponent is threatening the bishop, but this bishop is really well placed right where it is, well, I'm going to defend it. With the queen, queen e7, so that if you capture the bishop, well, I replace it with my queen, check, and on top of that, I attack this point right here. Careful, do we want to trade pieces when we're down a pawn? No? Nothing would happen if we traded these two bishops. Absolutely nothing would happen, because we're trading the opponent's only developed piece. In fact, the game continues this way. Bishop takes b4, and queen takes b4, check. Well, there's only one way not to lose a pawn here, right? This pawn is well defended by the bishop. It's true, it's being attacked by two pieces. Let's see how it continues. But the truly important one is the pawn on b2, because if this pawn is lost, these two pawns will be left hanging, meaning they have no pawns in their adjacent columns. And besides, we'd be threatening a very poorly defended rook. Therefore, white must play queen d2 here. Key question. Can the pawn on c4 be captured? No, of course not. You can't capture with the bishop because we'd lose the queen. And you can't capture with the queen because we'd lose the queen again with bishop takes c4. Therefore, this pawn, no way we're taking it. Perfect. This pawn, logically, not either, because it's well defended. So I ask you, would you capture the queen? Would you move it away? Or would you defend it with a pawn or with a knight, for example? What would you do? Think about it, and now I'm going to tell you the correct solution. There are several correct solutions here. The best thing is not to trade queens, okay? Although technically playing knight c6 would be a good idea, because if they trade queens, the knight would come in threatening this fork, right? The best thing, without a doubt, would be to move the queen. Remember something, we're down a pawn. What does that mean? It's true, we have initiative in exchange for developed pieces. But we don't want to trade pieces, and even less the queen, because we'll reach an endgame down a pawn, and logically, that endgame will be a loss for us. Therefore, we want to move the queen away and keep the queen on the board. So, chess teacher, why exactly is it placed on e7? Well, it's simple. We've detected that the opponent's king is completely defenseless. It's right here in the center on a wide open file. An open file is that file where there are no pawns. So we place the queen to start threatening discovered attacks. What is a discovered attack? Well, when we move the piece that's between the attacker and the defender of the check, therefore, we'd be threatening, for example, bishop g4 discovered check, bishop takes c4 discovered check, meaning here the player with the white pieces already has to be very careful. For example, would it be a good idea to defend against the check discovered with the bishop, bishop e2? Well, no, it would be a horrible idea, because we'd simply play bishop takes c4, and this bishop would be pinned. Therefore, the pawn's defender wouldn't really be defending the pawn because it's pinned. So, chess teacher, how do I stop the check? Would knight e2 be possible? Neither, because the knight would simply block the bishop, and bishop takes c4 would again win back the pawn. Remember well, if we're a pawn down and have better initiative, once we win back the pawn, we'll have better initiative for nothing. So we'll be much better off. In this case, then, how should the white pieces go about blocking the discovered check? Well, there's only one option, and that's to place the queen on e3. Logically, it wouldn't work on e2. Why? Would you know how to find the solution of what would happen if this queen is placed on e2? While, for example, it could continue with knight c6. Now, we're threatening this point here, we're threatening this point here. The typical fork advance with the move d5 wouldn't work because knight d4 would simply come, threatening the queen, and this queen can't go anywhere good. If it comes up, it's lost with a check and I take the queen. And if it moves away from the pin, then we could simply, for example, capture with a discovered check. How interesting, right? So we reach a conclusion. The only way, remember how we got here, don't be afraid to review because it's very important so it stays in your head. They're trying to exchange queens, right? We don't want to because we're a pawn down and we place it in a spot where we create problems for our opponent. It's important to know the discovered check. Very well, then we reach the conclusion that the only possible move here is queen e3. How interesting, right? Normally, if you're watching this game and you see queen e3, you don't know why it happened. Now you've understood perfectly why. Move after move. Remember that you can watch this video as many times as you need. No problem. Very well, how does the game continue now if they've already blocked the discovered check well? Well, indeed, we'll continue developing our pieces. Knight to c6 is a very good move. Now we see why this advance is impossible. We'll see it now. Very well. First, what are we doing? Developing three pieces while my opponent has none. See? The queen doesn't count as a piece because the pieces to develop are minor pieces, knights and bishops. We have all of them, my opponent none, in exchange for a pawn. But okay, chess teacher, why can't they make this move against me again? They're threatened in the bishop and the knight, so I'm about to lose a piece. Well, this wouldn't be possible because there's the move. The knight moves to square g4. Beautiful, right? What are we doing? Very simple. I know this is a high level class, but I'll explain it simply so you can all understand and improve a lot, okay? We're threatening this triple check to the king, queen, and rook, thus winning the game immediately. But what happens? If white defends this point here with the queen, as it's the only way to defend it, remember that, for example, defending with the knight wouldn't work. Why? Simply, we could follow up with knight to g4 here. The queen would have to move, we're threatening many things at once, and the position would collapse. So, one way or another, this queen must come to defend. But if she defends, what happens? There's another discovered check. And then we could continue, for example, with bishop takes d5, discovered check, then I'll take this pawn. If you block with the bishop, I'll take this one. This would be a disaster, right? So we conclude that after this knight to c6, d5 isn't possible. Simple as that. Do you understand? So if d5 isn't possible, what do they do here? Now the white player plays knight to f3. Much better. Develops a minor piece, doesn't make the mistake of advancing this pawn, tries to defend his position a bit. From a logical standpoint, when we're down by a pawn and want to seize the initiative, since we already have all of our pieces developed, it makes sense to focus on improving their positions. This knight starts attacking heavily, and it's a real threat, because right now it's attacking a queen that, depending on where she goes, will be in trouble, as she must keep defending the king. Therefore, she has no choice but to retreat to e2, because if she leaves this file, what would happen? Discovered checks with the bishop, so queen to e2. And now, how do we continue? Well, maybe now is the time to castle. And let's think, would you castle kingside or would you castle queenside? A right move would be to castle queenside. Do you know why? Because we bring this rook into the attack immediately, without losing a tempo. We castle well while bringing one of the rooks into the central files, which in this case are one semi-open and the other open. This one is semi-open because there's only one enemy pawn. Very well, how will things continue? Well, now they must try to kick out this knight, for example. They must try to keep developing their pieces. However, they're already too late. As you can see, the opponent's king is in the center. He tried to be too clever, and now the king won't be able to castle. He's going to have a very hard time. At least to castle, he must develop this bishop, and to develop it, he can't go out here because of the queen, nor here because of the pawn. So he tries to kick out this knight from here. What would you do, friends? I'm going to give you 3 seconds to think. You can always stop the video to think about it on your own, okay? Very well. The correct move is not to move the knight away. How about that? Would it be a good idea to move this knight, chess teacher? Well, don't misunderstand me. It wouldn't be a bad option to move the knight. However, our opponent would be gaining time and we'd be losing it. When we have such an advantage in the position, sometimes we don't care as much about material. And in this case, the correct move that the player with the black pieces found is this, bringing the last missing piece to the attack. And this is already devastating for our opponent. Here, the player with the white pieces has already reached that moment we talked about at the start of the game. He probably doesn't even know it because he thinks he's going to win a knight and then he actually does it. He captures this knight. Watch out. It's not that capturing this knight is a bad move. It is, understand me, it is a bad move, but any other would have been bad too. Black's position is infinitely superior. Let me explain. Here, Black has simply coordinated their pieces well to carry out a lightning attack. And it starts in the following way. The queen moves away to unblock the rook's file, facing the queen and the king, winning material. And in this case, we do it with a check so as not to lose any time. The first move, as you can see then, is this queen b4 check right here. Blocking with the knight would be stupid. Forgive the expression, but simply a move like bishop c4 would win the queen. See? The rook is threatening the queen and the king. And logically also the bishop, and it would be impossible to move the queen because it would be an illegal move. Therefore, the only way to stop the check without losing the queen is to block it with the queen herself. You understand this? If you have any doubts, you can review the game from the beginning again. No problem, okay? Very well, and now how do we continue? Well, now we're going to take advantage of the fact that the queen was forced to move, right? From the center file where she protected the king to perform a discovered attack. Both bishop takes c4 and bishop takes g4 would be possible, bishop takes g4 being a bit stronger. Why? Because it's threatening the king's defender. And now you're going to see why this is so important. Check, and there's only one way, right? To block this check. Bishop e2, the check is with the rook, right? Only way, bishop e2, and now how do we continue? Well, there are several ways here, but the most direct, beautiful, and lethal is the following. You can pause the video if you want. It's this. Rook takes e2. Brilliant move. Spectacular move. Let's see why. Can the rook be captured with the queen? No. Why? Because it's pinned. So it must be captured with the king, as simple as that. And so, why have we sacrificed the exchange? The sacrificing the exchange means giving up a rook for a minor piece, either the bishop or the knight. We've sacrificed the exchange because now we're not even going to move this queen, but instead we'll go in with knight takes d4 check. All of our pieces are working perfectly together. The king must move. Why? Because it's receiving a check from the knight. Could it go backwards? Well, no, that would be a huge mistake because bishop takes f3 would simply follow. It couldn't be recaptured because knight takes f3 check would follow and I'd take the queen. The queen couldn't be captured either because then knight c2 check would simply follow and I'd recapture the queen with a material advantage. Or in this case, it wouldn't be a material advantage, but a checkmate would follow. It would be queen takes, knight c2 check. The king would have to move, for example, to f1, and then the rook would enter on d1 and it would be checkmate. Therefore, the king can't move backwards, right? So where does this king have to go after the check? Well, the king can only go to one square, and that square is f1. It might look like everything is defended, but no. Simply now, queen takes c4, and we continue with the initiative. See? We don't give our opponent any breathing room, so they can't turn the situation around. Check, and it must move. Would it be possible to come here? This make. Do you know why? Bishop takes knight. And it couldn't be recaptured because then knight takes f3, check, and knight take the queen again. So here they've lost the knight, and the position would still be an absolute disaster. The rook would enter, knight takes c2, okay, and this would be an absolute disaster. So it can only come here, to ga1. There's no other way, see? And then how do we finish this game? Knight takes knight, check. The king can't move because I'll take the queen. With the rook or the knight, well, the only thing they can do is take this knight because the king can't go anywhere anyway. The queen is here and the knight is here. The only move is to take the knight. But now look at this. I'm sure many of you would say, I'll take the queen. Taking the queen would be a mistake. If I take the queen, knight takes rook would follow, threatening our queen, defending this point, and although, careful, our advantage would allow us to win the game with good play, it wouldn't be the same advantage we have now, because our opponent would have two rooks for the queen. And watch out, because that's a very good compensation. So the correct move, do you know what it is? Taking this pawn, bishop takes f3. And why, chess teacher, do you prefer taking a pawn over taking the queen? Because we're not just taking a pawn. Watch out, we're threatening something much stronger. Do you see it? Correct. We're threatening queen g4 check and then queen g2 checkmate. Therefore, they must be really careful here to stop this threat. They don't have time. They don't have time to move the queen away from the threat. Many of you will think, well, I'll move the queen while defending this checkpoint. And this wouldn't be possible because we'd simply follow up with the brilliant move. Pay attention, because this is impressive. Queen f1 check, sacrificing the queen, because when it's captured, rook d1 would be mate. Therefore, the queen can't go here either. What resource did the player with the white pieces find to defend themselves? He finds this resource, rook h3. Why? Because now, when the queen comes to g4, which is actually what happened in the game, white can defend with this move. And watch out. It's true that we can win the queen, but they can too. What do we do now? Would it be a good idea to capture the queen? Well, no, it wouldn't be a good idea because then the game would be equalized. We both traded queens. The right thing is to do this. Queen h5. What are we threatening? Very simple. What are we threatening? Queen h1 check read. You see it? Very important. We're threatening checkmate and we're threatening the queen without them threatening us. And so, how can they stop this checkmate? There's only one move. They now give up the exchange rook for bishop. Now it wouldn't be checkmate anymore. And now, what do we take? The rook or the queen? Again, important. We must take the rook. If we take the queen, we'd simply be in a fairly balanced position. If we take the rook, what's happening? Well, we're threatening two things at once. We're threatening the queen, but if the queen moves, we'd simply enter with check and it would end up being checkmate. So, what should the white pieces do here? They can't do absolutely anything. Why? Because they have two options: either give up the queen. If they do anything else, I'll take the queen. And if they decide to save it, as I just told you, we'd simply enter with the rook check, and then rook h1 would be checkmate. Therefore, here, after rook, here after queen takes rook, the player with the white pieces resigned. What do you think, friends, of this great lesson and great game? If you liked it, leave a big like. I love this because that way I see that you love the video too. Tell me in the comments what you thought of the game. And if you want to go a step further, you can subscribe to my free newsletter, where every Sunday I send you additional information, additional classes by email for free. You have it right down here in the description or by searching online for Chess Teacher Newsletter. Alright, I hope you really loved this video, and as always, I'll see you tomorrow in the next video, my friends. Bye.